Sawadee Krap and welcome to another episode here for the FungetPod, Mindful Media and Communication. And today, serious talk again after last time's Olympic talk, which not to say that the Olympics aren't serious, and we will come back to that in probably a week or so. We'll talk about the Olympics one more time because, oh Lord, is there lots to talk about. But today, I figured we talk about something a little bit more, I said serious, maybe impactful, important. You be the judge. But we talk about politics. We talk about the U.S. presidential elections, the race for the president in the United States, the presidential campaigns. And why do I do that? I'm not from the US, I don't live in the US, but I think it's very interesting to look at the US in terms of media coverage, communication styles, communication theories, and I think that also the rest of the world, we can learn from that, what to do and maybe also what not to do. So that's why I look at the US presidential race when it comes to media and communication theories. It's a great case study and something to sometimes smile about, smirk about, laugh about, cry about, but I hope we can take away some learnings, and hence I'm trying to look at that for a little bit. And I have a few segments here for you today. As always, I try to put the communication lens on it. That's what we do here on the podcast. So in the first segment, I will talk about which of the basic theories that we discussed over the last few months here on the podcast apply to the presidential race when it comes to media coverage, communication styles, and so on. And then I will look into how the two main candidates that we have, that they have, because, hey, democracy has only two big parties, how they utilize those strategies, or how they are being treated by the media via those strategies. Okay, so that's the plan for now. 20-25 minutes, not more on political episodes, because I don't want you to I don't want to say get bored, but politics is a tough topic to stick with sometimes, so we try to keep those episodes short-ish to make sure we get the best out of it. So let's jump right into it. Having it said, jump right into it with our first and one of our favorite theories here in the podcast, the agenda setting theory. Right? So agenda setting, as you might remember, and if not, welcome to the podcast. Let me explain. The agenda setting theory simply posits that media doesn't tell us what to think, but it tells us what to think about. So by focusing on certain issues, the media sets the agenda for public discussion and kind of like prioritizes topics that the media, deem to be important. So if you look at the current landscape, for example, you can see which topics different media channels, media outlets highlight in the election coverage, such as the economy, for example, healthcare, immigration, and that's how different media outlets prioritize the topics they cover and how they influence voter concerns and perceptions of the candidates. So, for example, Fox News will talk about like how the economy was doing better under Donald Trump. I don't know if it's true or not. I did not look into it, to be honest, but the example stands, right? While then the left, CNN, for example, will say, yeah, no, that's not true. Biden created more jobs. We have less unemployment and whatnot. Or then Fox News will focus on immigration. There are so many illegal immigrants. And then the Biden-friendly outlets will be like, no, but we have more immigrants, but it means we are also doing something right because we integrate them into society, and hence blah, blah, blah. And so different talking points. So again, they're not telling us hate Trump. Well, they're close, but they're not saying like hate Trump. They're just like, hey, look at this. That's what you should be thinking. Or look at this. That's what she, they did well. That's what you should be thinking about. Okay, so we think about those different topics thanks to agenda setting theory in the media. Okay. When it comes to the second theory, the framing theory, we also discussed this before. Again, if not, welcome to the podcast, subscribe. Framing theory simply means that media outlets, they put a frame on the whole big topic, right? So the topic is like very big, very extensive, and the media is like, we can't cover, or we don't want to cover all the sides to one topic, so we put our frame on it. Okay, so the suggestion in this theory is that the media frames stories in a way to shape the audience's interpretation of certain topics. So it's close to the agenda setting theory, right? So the framing can highlight like specific aspects while, for example, downplaying others, and that again influences how the audience understands a certain story, right? So in reality right now, if you look at different frames that are used by different media outlets, for example, while Fox would focus on like how Donald Trump used to be a strong leader because he told China that they can't mess with us, and then was imposing like import and export like different I don't know, policies that maybe the Biden administration doesn't have or didn't support anymore, for example. While CNN would focus on him being a very divisive figure rather than a strong leader, right? They would say, no, he led to two countries like communicating less, for example. Then CNN would highlight Kamala Harris as a trailblazer, while then Fox would say like, no, she's inexperienced, and so they put different frames on like the same story, basically. Okay, so that's what framing theory means. And then, of course, if you see the similar frames over time, right, that's something that you then think of, consider it like, okay, maybe that's right, and so on. More on this in a second. The answer on, more on this in a second. But before I go into that, I would want to mention the priming theory, which is a theory we haven't discussed that much on the podcast. So I'm going to slow down a little bit. Priming theory simply deals with the media's role in shaping standards by which then audiences evaluate, in this case, political figures. Okay, so by emphasizing certain specific issues, the media can prime audiences to consider those issues as an important criteria for judgment, for example. Okay, so the media primes us, the audience, on what they think is important. So, for example, in this case, right, so the continuous coverage of like specific issues such as Trump's legal battles, okay, or Kamala Harris policy proposals, for example, that primes voters to consider these issues as central for decision making, because we see those issues in the news over and over and over again. So we think we're being primed. We think that those issues are the ones that matter. Okay, so you can see agenda setting, framing, and priming going closely hand in hand. So you don't just use one theory, right? One approach. You use them all at the right time, in the right moment, to influence the audience as much as possible. And another theory that you use, or at least that you think will come into effect, maybe a better way to say it, is one theory I talk about a lot. Others don't talk about it much, and I do it a lot because I think it's very important. It's the spiral of silence theory. We talked about this before in the podcast. Again, if not, welcome to the podcast. Like, share, subscribe. Spiral of silence simply suggests that individuals, right, in the members of the audience, are less likely to express their opinion if they believe that they are in the minority. Therefore, fear of like social isolation, for example. So media portrayal of like majority opinions can create this perceived dominant opinion, and it tries to silence minority views. Okay. So in our case again, we could see that majority opinions might suppress dissenting voices, especially regarding like more controversial candidates or policies, such as, for example, Kamala Harris, right? So when she replaced Joe Biden, there was no alternative presented. It's like, no, it's her. Like, no, there's no alternative. And so Democrats who would be like, yeah, I'm a Democratic voter, I lean Democratic, but I'm not a fan of hers, but maybe I'm not. Now everyone's saying she's the only one, so I guess I'm gonna go with her, I guess. I'm not saying anything. So that's the spiral of silence. The same thing on the other end, of course, right? The same thing, what Trump is the only candidate? Like, huh? I'm not a fan of Trump. I'm a Republican. I'm conservative, but I don't like Trump. But I guess if there's no one else, and if he's the one everyone likes, I mean, I guess I'm gonna not say anything. So that's the spiral of silence theory, okay? Minority voices being silenced, so to speak. Even if you're not the minority, they make you think you're the minority, so that you then don't voice your opinion. Okay, that's why people who, for example, supported Robert Kennedy Jr. have been pretty silent, right? Except Joe Rogan, but other than that. Right, so they're like, no one's talking about him, no one gives him a chance, I guess it's not worth to, may I rather not. Spiral of silence theory right here. The fifth theory out of 8 that I'm going to give you, so bear with me, but I think all those theories simply apply perfectly here, and it's just a great, again, case to look at, is the cultivation theory. Again, another old friend of the podcast. The cultivation theory explains that long-term exposure to media content can shape viewers' perception of reality. So heavy media consumers may develop a distorted view of reality based on what they constantly see in the media. So that's how the media blurs the lines, right? They show you one thing over and over and over again, and eventually you're like, oh yeah, all immigrants are bad, for example, right? So continuous media coverage and narratives about political instability, for example, or economic performance or non-performance can influence public perception over a longer time. And that, of course, then in return affects attitudes and behaviors of the audience. When we talk media and communication theories, for example, there's this model that suggests that it's over time, what you're trying to influence with your audience, you can influence 3 things, like knowledge, attitude, and behavior. And of course, influencing knowledge is pretty easy because, hey, I give you knowledge. Here, take it or leave it, but here, take it. Now you know something that you didn't know before. That's easy. And if you then consistently communicate with an audience, maybe you can change the attitude towards something, make them think about something like, okay, I thought this before, but now that I see this cultivated over time, and I think about it. Maybe I wasn't all right. Maybe I didn't know everything. And then if you keep doing that, right, eventually it might lead to behavioral change, to actually change how the audience behaves, which is very difficult to change someone's behavior, as you probably know. Okay, so cultivation theory can help with that by exposing the audience to similar talking points over and over and over and over again. This does not mean that you have to send the same message over and over again. This can be boring, this can be redundant, but similar talking points over and over again will lead to the audience eventually considering and then maybe even following through. Okay, so that's the cultivation theory. Another friend of ours is the use and gratification theory. Hopefully the reason why you listen to that podcast. Why? Because the use and gratification theory focuses on why individuals, the audience, actively choose specific media outlets based on their needs and wants and desires, such as information, entertainment, social interaction, German accents. Yeah, so you have a reason why you consume the media that you're consuming. You actively choose the media that you want to consume. So this theory emphasizes the role of the audience. Yeah, in media terms, we call it like an active audience in selecting the media. So it's not just passive consumption. It's not like I take whatever. You actively search out the media that gives you, again, entertainment, information, German accent, and whatnot. Okay. That's the reason why, for example, in this case, certain demographic groups choose specific news sources. Yeah, for example, younger voters, right, favoring social media, Gen Z favoring TikTok, for example, while older voters might favor traditional news, millennials might favor Instagram or Facebook. You remember, if you're Gen Z, you remember Facebook. And this obviously influences their political knowledge and opinions. And I can give you actually an example also from Germany, right? The right-wing party in Germany, like a real hardcore right-wing party, not naming them now, but they're very good on TikTok because it's so easy to create short-form content that hate on stuff like, right? They're like, this sucks, we will fix it, vote for us. It's very easy in like 30 seconds, right? You don't have to make big points, you just point things out that are terrible, and then people are like, yeah, that's terrible, let's fix it, without thinking about how to fix things and if it's actually true. So if you know your audience, that's very important. Know your audience, and you can be where they are, and you can give them what they want. And so this theory of use and gratification, very, very powerful, because if you give them what they want, yeah, they're like, hey, that's what I was looking for. I'm going to follow you now. I'm going to maybe even trust and believe you. Okay, so this theory, very, very powerful. It sounds very simple. It is, but it's also very powerful. So think about the use and gratification theory when you're creating content or when picking platforms, for example. Okay. The second but last one is called the two-step flow theory, and it's really hard not to jump into a song. Two-step flow theory, right? So two-step flow theory posits that media effects are mediated by opinion leaders. Okay, if you're into marketing or something, you might have heard the term of KOL, key opinion leader. So, but opinion leaders, they interpret and pass on information to their followers. And so these opinion leaders, they can significantly influence how the information is received and understood. Doesn't mean it needs to be a social media influencer. It doesn't need to be Kim K or anyone like that, right? Opinion leaders could be news anchors too, for example. It could be people on TV, in the radio, and so on. And people that you listen to can be your professor. Yeah, for example, okay? Can be your parents if you want to, okay? So opinion leaders are the ones that make sense of the information for you. So you don't get, if you're watching the feed, I'm painting a picture with my hands. If not, I'll try it with my words again. So you have the raw information out there, everything that's happening out there, and you can't process. You can't, you don't know where to get all the information from. It's hard to process everything. Like, for example, when we talk about Israel and Gaza, for example, it's so hard to process like everything, right? I mean, I hope you all agree on like there should not be a war and things like this, and people shouldn't kill each other. We agree on that, I hope, but it's like hard to understand all the backstory, history, and whatnot. So you rely on key opinion leaders, a news anchor, some history channel on Instagram / YouTube, your parents, your professor, your teacher, whatever, to make sense of it for you. So that's the second step. Okay, one step, original news source. Second step, then the key opinion leaders. So that's why it's called two-step flow. Okay, it flows via two steps to you. Okay, that's the two-step flow. So yeah. That means that political pundits, for example, back to the election race, that political pundits and influencers in this space, and maybe community leaders, religious leaders maybe even, they shape public opinion and in this case and also voter behavior during that election cycle, right? So that's a very powerful position to be in. That's why you should examine like very carefully, who do you trust? Who do you make your opinion leader? Okay, the last theory I want to discuss before then I quickly jump into like how this affects both of the candidates, because again, clearly we only have two candidates. It's the social learning theory. Social learning theory suggests that people learn behaviors and norms through observing others, particularly those portrayed in the media, of course. You see like, oh, look, that's what they do in the media all the time. Maybe I should do the same. Okay, so that highlights simply the role of media in modeling behavior. And if you look at this, it's important to see then how the media portrays, in this case, political candidates and their behaviors, because this might then influence voter behavior, attitudes. For example, you're going to emulate certain rhetoric traits or political stances of your candidate. Now, it's not to say that we just copy them word by word or move by move, of course, but kind of influence. So that if Trump says this over and over again, then I guess, and everyone is cool with it, I guess it's okay to say it. If Harris has this stance and everybody around me kind of like supports it and is cool with it, maybe it's the right thing. Maybe I should think like that, do that too. Okay, that's social learning. You learn by observing others around you, but also by observing those portrayed in the media. And cultivation theory, you see it over and over and over again, and then eventually you might follow that role, for example. Okay, that example. Okay, so those were like 8 theories that I think that really matter when it comes to how politics is being presented in the media and how politics is being communicated in the media. And now, final 2 segments, I just quickly look into how those two candidates are using it and are being portrayed via those. Okay, not going to take that long, so stick with me, 5 minutes. And I start with Donald Trump because, he almost got eliminated, right? So, and it's kind of weird that I have to use weird words to describe it, because otherwise YouTube or who else is going to take the podcast down if you say the actual word. Like what? So, if you look at Donald Trump's approach to media, right, and to communication too, it's very much characterized by like direct engagement with his audience and super frequent use of social media. Okay, So if you look at like how he uses platforms such as True Social, for example, how his rally speeches are being structured, or even how the interaction with the mainstream media is happening, right? You can focus like on how he controls the narrative. He's always in charge, and always demands attention. And you might say he says outrageous things, yes, but it's of course on purpose, because if you say lots of outrageous things, you know that's what the media will focus on. They will not focus on anything else. They will not dig deeper. They will not try to find anything else. They will look at what you're saying, okay? Also, being active on social media, of course, increases outreach, increases reach, and he knows that people on social media, short attention span, they don't want to dig deep into stuff. They want like easy bites, and that's what he gives them. And so that's pretty smart from a communications point of view. I'm not saying it's a good thing, because of course the depth is lacking, obviously, but in the attention economy, and I hate that word, that we're in, it works. Okay, so unfortunately, and I'm not taking either side right now. I say unfortunately because I'm not a fan of this attention economy thing, right? So I think like in-depth discussions should always win over like short sound bites. But in this case, unfortunately, it wins. And Kamala Harris, in a second, is doing the same thing. Yeah, she's way more active on social media than, for example, Biden was, okay? The media, then, how does the media portray Donald Trump? Right? You can see different media outlets, different agendas, of course. They portray Trump in different lights. It all, of course, reflects their political stance, right? Their agenda. So if you look at left-leaning versus right-leaning media, what I did in the beginning, CNN versus Fox, for example, of course, they portray him in completely different lights. In Fox, he's like the savior, the strong leader we need. On CNN, he's the devil in disguise, the one who ends democracy for all of us and leads us into like a third active world war, for example, right? So this, of course, impacts voter perception and voter behavior. Now, bringing it back to his communication style, we said earlier, like very strict, straightforward, very, very direct, very controversial rhetoric, and of course also very populist. And we often connect populism to something negative, which it is. But there's a reason why there's a term for it, because it works. Okay, it used to work back then, it still works today. So his style resonates with like his base. Like it polarizes the electorate, and it influences media coverage, and in return the public discourse in a way that he can control. Again, he says outlandish things, he says populist things, because he knows what this will lead to. Okay, so that's what he's doing, and that's what he's doing quite well. Now, if you look at Kamala Harris for a second, one thing we have to discuss is also the stepping down of Joe Biden, because I think from a communications point of view, that wasn't the smoothest way to do it, right? I think the transition was not communicated well to the public. I understand that the narrative was built around like Biden handing over power, and it's the first time ever that a president just hands over power, and it's such a great move of his. While then, of course, the other aisle says like, hey, I mean, he didn't have it together anyway, so I mean, he had to, and they just kept him around long enough for Biden to be the candidate, so that no one else could sweep in and become a candidate, right? So different talking points. I think that could have been communicated a little bit better. Also, the media channels how they were using, right? It was Biden's campaign was all around like more traditional media. Yes, he uses social media, but not in a very engaging style. So I think they could have kind of like communicated, especially with a younger audience, a little bit better. Like, why it's the time right now? Why did they wait? Blah blah blah. I think that would have been like a better way to communicate it. Now Harris, of course, is way more active on social media, trying to engage a younger audience way more than Biden before. So maybe that's a step into the right direction if you're a Democrat. Again, not taking any stances, just saying from just a communications point of view, this might be a smart move here. That leads me to her actual media strategy, right? So the way she approaches communication, also shows how she is trying to kind of like identify where to be on, which platforms to be on, like how to use those platforms in different ways, because she uses traditional media different than social media, for example, and she tries to kind of like form her own identity right now on all those platforms, or her communication team is trying to do that. So they're trying to figure out like how do we portray her on socials and traditional media and so on, because they understand that it's not necessarily the same audience all the time. Yeah? So she is, of course, a lot of traditional media, but she's also on podcasts, for example. She's active on TikTok, or her team is. Her speeches are a bit more engaging, trying to use like more normal words, right, than maybe Biden before. And just tries to aim to, of course, up her image and tries to connect her to the voters. And now when we look at how the media portrays Kamala Harris, again, same thing as before, so that's why I said we're coming back to this. It depends on like which side of the aisle you're on. Yeah? Positive versus negative framing, right? You put the frames on there, as we discussed earlier. So the emphasis, for example, could be on her policy proposals that A, were good or didn't go through, depends on where you are. Her leadership qualities, she's a strong leader versus she has no experience, and potential challenges. She's a DEI hire, that's what they say, not me, just saying like those different framing points, right? And those portrayals, of course, impact the public image and then also voter support, right? Do I believe it? Don't I believe it, for example? Okay, so that's just how the media uses the theories I discussed earlier in length to showcase, to talk about those two different candidates. Okay. Last thing here that I want to highlight is that also that media coverage of key events, of course, also plays into how we see those candidates. For example, those real-time events during election, right? So debates, of course, campaign rallies, scandals, people getting shot, right? So look at a strong leader. He's fighting, raising his fist, saying fight, 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 versus that's staged. What are they doing? I don't believe it, right? Completely different narratives of the same thing that happened. Okay, so that's one thing that's very important to understand. Like, what's the agenda of the outlet that I'm consuming? And this, in return, all the theories, agenda setting, priming, framing, and so on, right? It all leads to the voter behavior. It leads to how media actually affects our behavior. So if we are aware that media outlets, traditional media, social media, anyone talking about anything, has their agenda, has their way of framing it, has their way of priming us, and so on, then you can take a step back and be like, okay, I see what you're doing. Let me just look at the facts. Okay, let me check the facts on a different platform. Let me think about it. Okay, so that's what we should do. Critical thinking is more important than ever, and that's my big takeaway right now. It's not rocket science, it's just think critically. Yeah, that's the only time when you can have basically more or less a direct impact on politics in your country. Like, not just in the US, like anytime you vote, it's your chance to have an impact on what's happening. So do make informed decisions. Don't just be divided into like we versus them. Yeah, make your decision based on what do you believe in, what do you stand for, and don't be fooled, I want to almost say, by all those strategies to just follow the narrative. Okay? All right. I think that's enough. Politics, we are at 28 minutes, so at least we're under 30 minutes. Let me know your thoughts on how politicians communicate. Does it work? Do you see yourself being sometimes fooled into just following teams? Let me know your thoughts. As always, like, share, subscribe. Please do leave a review. That helps a lot, reaching a wider audience. Until then, as always, stay safe, take care, go vote once it's time, and we talk soon. Saudi Cup.